Right, you're listening to Trysteropod, Episode 8. I'm David Kulma, the other guy is Dorian Wallace. We're composers and leftists, and we talk about music and politics. And so how's it going today, Dorian?
It's going fucking rock and roll, dude. We're still getting into the swing of doing this podcast. Today we actually have a good buddy of mine, badass bass player and composer Nick Dunston. Nick, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me out here.
Awesome.
Great
So I guess just to get into this, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got into music and how you got into the music that you're doing currently and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I got into music really through like the public school system in New York, which is where I grew up. My mom confronted me one day when I was a kindergartner and said that my school was offering free lessons on either cello or violin, and I didn't really know what either of those instruments were, so I kind of just haphazardly picked cello because it was a little bit bigger. And then, I got into classical music a little bit, but was pretty bored by it, to be honest, and not really a particularly hard worker. And, eventually, as all cellists who go into rock music do, I saw the School of Rock, started playing electric bass, and then, started making music with my friends on a more like kind of informal level, and that really got me excited about it. And gradually I started to get into jazz once again through schools, and I switched from electric bass to acoustic and just kind of fell down that rabbit hole, and that really is kind of part of what got me into the actual like discipline part of music making, and kind of looking at it as a craft and not just a hobby or something that was like purely just for passing time. And yeah, I went to jazz school at the new school, and so there were people there who really got me interested in all sorts of music. But I think that at a certain point, being a bass player, I was kind of utilized in a lot of contexts that felt like I wasn't really doing anything except for playing a role. Like, it felt very impersonal in certain ways, and but I was still around a bunch of really inspiring musicians, and being so heavily informed by really amazing artists, particularly Reggie Workman, who was at the new school and is still teaching there. And eventually I think that this frustration of sort of being in this like role of just like a functional bass player type thing got to me, where to the point that I just I was always like composing a little bit since high school and really middle school, but at a certain point I just decided that I had to really make that a priority and make that a commitment. And it's not that I don't enjoy playing other people's music, because I absolutely do, but I definitely at a certain point realized that I had a lot to say as a composer, and just generally as an artist. And my music for me is the priority. And even what I think of as quote unquote my music doesn't only exist in what I do as quote unquote a composer. It any contributions I make to an ensemble or a piece or a collaboration, I do take pride in and like emotional stock in, for sure. But it just, I think that personal autonomy and a really strong sense of identity really became important to me at the ages of like 18, 19, when I started really playing a lot.
And you've played with like a lot of people, man. Just like Yeah, he's. I'm just looking at your bio. He performed, toured, and recorded professionally with bands led by artists such as Tishwan Sori, Vijay Iyer, Mark Rebo, Chess Smith, Imani Uzari. Like, just lot of the who's are on here. And so, do you have any like you had mentioned Reggie Workman, who's obviously like a super genius bass player and composer and thinker. But are there any other maybe any other instrumentalists that you found inspiring in your development?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because like a lot of the people who you just mentioned, or all of them, I would say, who have been really fortunate to work with professionally, I still see them first and foremost as mentors slash teacher types. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I'm like, thinking of someone like Mark Rebo as a colleague in like a very like kind of like democratic sense of the word. Um, or yeah, I mean I don't even know what I'm trying to say with that, but basically, all the people who a lot of the older musicians that I have the opportunity to work with, um, it still feels like this kind of like apprentice type role, and it's not that I don't feel like that my contributions aren't valued as a professional, or that I need to like always kind of succumb to their like I'm not just playing a role with them. Like I am very much contributing my own kinds of like imprint on the music, but I'm all that to say that there will never not be a moment, I think, for me where I'm not just like, oh shit, like this is the thing and I need to like really be absorbing all of this right now. It's like, I know it's a cliche, but it feels like school in the best way possible.
Sure.
Yeah, totally.
It's
Yeah.
the thing that I've had to do as I get older in this similar kind of way, where it's like working with people that are older than you that you still look up to, is that you sort of realize that there's never a point in which adulthood is clear. There's always some sort of clear learning that needs to take place. And the only way that I ever sort of move beyond that thought in a certain way, or think of it differently, I should say that way, is that when I've had to do enough teaching and mentoring of other people, that I realize that other people think of me like I think of those people that I take really seriously who are older than me. And it's like, that's thinking about it from that end is like, well, holy crap, wait, what? And then, but
Right.
when I speak to them, they really do talk to me like I'm one of those people, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
crazy.
And I've always and that just kind of that responsibility, I think, is really intimidating to me. Like the whole the role of the teacher. Like I've done a few kind of like minor guest teaching and like or like teaching artist type roles before, and I have a few more on the horizon. Like relatively quote unquote low commitment type things, and it just terrifies me. And I know it's the kind of thing that's like practice makes perfect, and it's like anything else. It's it's a craft in and of itself. But yeah, but exactly like for the reason that you're describing, it's I don't know, like the weight of it just is kind of like crushing to me.
Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah.
the thing that I take solace in about it is that I've sort of been thrown into teaching over the past years, and I've been very careful to try to get very good at it. But the thing I realized after a while was that you had to... you're going to find people that need your help, and you realize that you're the only person that can help them, and so you'll step up. I mean, it's not because you're ready, or it's not because you're the right person. It's just because you can't foresee another circumstance where someone will help this person in the way they need help, and you can. So you just do it anyway.
Mm.
I mean, it's not about whether or not it's fear or am I doing this right. It's you need help, and nobody else is going to help you, man. So I'll do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, it's like
No,
I've ended up with a bunch of students that are kind of, they don't necessarily fit into the kind of programs that I've been teaching in. And I sit there in a room with them and they're not necessarily doing well, or they clearly don't care about what's going on. And I just like, So what is it that you like? And it's like, oh, well, you're not going to get that here. Oh shit. I know, I don't necessarily know that thing, but I know that I could help. So I do.
Actually, just to jump in on this, there was a student that David had. David used to be a professor at Winthrop University for, was it music theory?
Yeah, theory of some other things, yeah.
Yeah. And like David calls me one day, and he's like, and by the way, you're going to get to hear my David Kulma impression.
Oh, great, wonderful.
But he was like, Dorian, I wanted to know if you could check out this band. A student of mine is listening to it, and I don't quite understand it. And so he sent me a Bandcamp file of this band called Infant Annihilator.
Yeah,
and
there it is, yeah.
So like I listened to the album, and they identify as a deathcore band.
Okay.
And yeah, well, and you know, the whole thing is like David is a classically trained oboe player, and all of that. And I think I might be in a similar camp with you, Nick, of kind of the untraditional route. Like I learned how to play music by jamming with friends and all of that initially. But so anyways, like. I'm talking to David, and it was like, yeah, man. I guess they're a deathcore band, and he's like, okay, what is deathcore? And it's like, all right, well, yeah, no. Well, deathcore is it's kind of like a combination of grindcore music with like influence from death metal. Okay.
Okay.
What is grindcore and what is death metal? and it's like, when you start like having to explain those things, it like, you start to be like, wait, what the fuck is that? But you still know these terms. It's like, well, grindcore, like it's more like working class, like, coming from like the punk rock tradition, where death metal is more like lower income, like urban populations with like a lot of octatonic harmonies, and metalcore was something that kind of grew out of that, but deathcore then went back to the roots of death metal, but with more of a grindcore approach.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very helpful
it
conversation,
really did.
by the way.
Oh yeah, and well, it also showed how good of a teacher you are, David, because you were really putting this work in.
Oh yeah, I had to listen.
Response...
You know how long I had to listen to that kind of stuff just to sort of get. We literally that I only did one lesson with that guy, and it was literally me sitting on the couch with him, and we're listening to this music, and he says, "Well, I want to write stuff that's like the guitar part because he's a guitar player," and I'm listening to it and going, "There's a guitar part? I mean, I can hear bass, I can hear drums." And I couldn't hear the guitar. But oh, yeah, it's this. And he starts playing it. And I'm like, I'd never heard that. And then like, hold on, let's listen to the track again. And we listen to it again, and there's the guitar part. I literally just I had so little experience listening to metal that I couldn't piece apart the texture until someone pointed it out.
Right.
I mean, he literally taught me how to listen to metal.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that was so cool about David's response, I remember the end of the conversation, because we talked for like an hour and a half about it.
Yeah.
And you were like, all right, nope, this just answered it. I knew I had to put work in to understand this music, and now I just know how much I have to put in. And
right.
You started digging into metal music.
Exactly. It's the deeper you get, the more. The further away you really are, yeah.
But in a certain way, the point of the story is that he wanted to do a particular thing, and even though I didn't know how to do it, I was willing to be the person to help him think about it so that he could get better.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
there aren't a lot of teachers that are willing to do that.
Yeah, the other part of that was the classical music school training.
Right.
Didn't really have
helpful.
that option for this student.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Just
no, yeah.
wonder how many people saw. Oh, no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I have a this like upcoming one of the upcoming like I guess teaching engagements I was referring to, is it's a classroom setting, but it's a small group of students, and they're all using like pretty common Western notation software to to talk about their pieces. It's a composition class basically, but despite that, the fact that they're using like Finale, Sibelius, etc., they're not. I was told that they're not all really quote unquote classical composers, and so I'm really interested in that, and just kind of trying to think about like how I can help them, and then thinking about the notation part of it too. Like if the notation itself is kind of imprinting this sort of like actual musical influence on them that maybe isn't exactly what they need. Like I'm always kind of thinking about that. Like if young composers, and not that I'm separating myself from the term young composers, but let's say younger composers, if they need like, or if what the line is between giving them tools, but then like also recognizing the bias of certain tools, and that like no tool is really ever like a neutral. And I was actually taking a lesson recently with Eric Webbles that talked about, and he was talking about this a little bit. Like, for a while, I had this ritual where the first thing I would do when I woke up, at like 5, 6 in the morning, whatever, is immediately stumble over to my desk, stumble because I just woke up, not because and just write. But the thing is, I would always write with a pencil and like my a manuscript, like 5-line staff notebook, and so that's the first thing that I saw every morning. And so writing every morning was great for obvious reasons, but it still is like, okay, if you're looking at this thing every morning that you write, it's still gonna leave a kind of impression on your brain, especially when you're like kind of just in this state of semi-consciousness. And so that's something that I think about a lot now. When composing, like it doesn't always have to come from. Well, for one, it doesn't have to come from the same single perspective or starting place. If it is going to be like a tactile experience, but yeah, it's the actual starting point in the first place is automatically going to kind of shape the thing in a certain way, and so I'm trying to think about that for myself, but then also when I'm kind of put in these teaching situations.
Well, that's a great thing to think about. I mean, and that's something a lot of composing teachers have to work against, especially with all the, it's really easy to see the ways in which notation software biases what you're doing, but it's harder for most people to see, especially older composers, is to see how the pencil also biases your decisions.
Yes.
It's like, because you sitting there with a piece of paper and a pencil is gonna tend to have you make certain choices over others. Now, it's also true that in sort of certain classical music composer land, that those are the ones that are given priority. There's something that seems to be quote real about that some people argue that notation software mars and ruins that is something valuable. But obviously, as with any kind of tool, there are positives and negatives to their use, and it's really what you're describing. It sounds like is wanting to be cognizant and aware of those things as you're thinking about how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not necessarily about like quote unquote escaping tools, or like trying to be freed from like any kind of bias, but just know that it's there, and that any decision you make, any process in the composition is affected by that bias, and you can choose whatever you want to do with it, but just the awareness, I think, is super important.
Sure. Well, that's the thing about masterclass situations, or like when you're just kind of you float in and you're there for like an hour or two, and then you leave and everybody continues with their normal life. Is that the role of that composer in that situation? Isn't to like do something like terribly long-winded or clear. It's to sort of just drop hints of ideas of different ways of thinking. that spur other people who are out of their normal routine so that they reconsider how they go about doing what they do. So it ends up being important in some ways, and it's helpful as a kind of a shock to the, well, have you thought about it this way kind of thing. But but there's also the freedom of that, if you clearly know what you're doing and you're thinking about. I mean, just the way you're talking about this shows that you've already put so much thought into this that I'm sure you'll find things valuable to say in the moment. It ends up being that, just trusting yourself that you know enough to do that when you're there, you'll get their music and thoughts will come into your head and you'll find a way to say them out loud. I mean, that's basically what I have to do most of the time.
Yeah. I mean,
go
ahead.
Yeah, Dorian.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody today, like this morning, an opera singer who, she had said something along the lines of, hey, do you know where I can meet somebody to teach me how to play jazz piano? Because I just don't think I can play jazz at all. And I found that happens a lot with conservatory trained musicians, where they put these like mental roadblocks on what styles they can and cannot do. And she literally attributed her inability to play jazz music to her lack of creativity.
Gross.
Oh, wow.
Which was just such
Why does she even think that? That's so. How do we teach people to think that way? God.
Oh my God.
She clearly has so much creativity. She thought to ask in the first place. You know how much creativity it costs to ask that question?
Yeah. Well, and
Jesus.
this is, somebody who went to Manhattan School of Music for performance, in opera. And it just, I found that so interesting. And we got to talking about it where it was like, first off, like what is jazz even? Like what do you define as jazz and not jazz? Where is that line on what that word even means? But then secondly, it's like we were improvising in that very moment. Just the fact that we were having a conversation that was not scripted, we were doing verbal improvisation, which is what language is. And but to get even deeper into it, it's like, all right, like how many roles have you played? Like how much singing have you ever done? And the number obviously is like countless. And it's like, do you sing written music the exact same way every single time you do it? And she was like, no. It's like that's improvisation in itself. Right. But it was just such a strange mental block, and that ended up being the conclusion of the conversation was like, like the way you learn how to play jazz is start playing jazz.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, oh gosh, I mean, I go back and forth because it's like because you obviously like she has a lot of respect for the music, it seems, just by virtue of her like understanding that it is like a an involved, in some way, like an involved, like kind of like deep traditional and a tradition that involves innovation and creativity, but still a traditional American music, and yeah, like it's. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand like how intimidating it is, and like, I mean, shit, like I'm intimidated by it, so it's like that never really goes away.
Yeah.
And like even there are even days where I'm thinking like, oh, like how do I play jazz? Like, what is like, am I doing that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the idea that like her entire musical training has led her to the point where, she thinks she has no creativity. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily unique to classical training with a capital
No.
T. Like it's, I mean, even in jazz, like I feel like there are a lot of people like in jazz, like pedagogy. I think there are a ton of people who don't necessarily see it as creativity, but just like playing with an established language. The same that there would be within interpreting and embellishing classical music. So I don't know. I don't even think it's a stylistic thing really. I think it's just like the way that like so many schools are teaching this shit.
Well, I think it's something that's inherent to standardized teaching methods and the expectation of I'm I'm building on something that generations of people have done, and
Mm-hmm.
when you get into this kind of educational setting, there are these implicit boundary lines that people want to be careful that they don't overstep, and that ends up where there people get this idea that they can't explore this, or they need like unusual guidance in order to figure it out. Although I think the important thing here is that she recognized that she wanted to know how to do a thing, and she knew that she needed to ask somebody how, because she didn't know how to anymore, like
Hmm.
just to figure it out on her own. Because in the end, I mean, music is really a social practice, right? It's something we do together.
Oh yeah.
And so
Oh
the
yeah.
best way to learn how to do it is, well, somebody help me do this, and the best thing to do is like, well, let's jam once, see what happens, right? You know, and I'm sure
Oh
it'll be
yeah.
an
Are you?
eye-opening thing.
Do you guys ever listen or read to any Yusef Lateef's writing, or listen to any of his recordings or any of that stuff?
His writings, you said?
Yeah, Yusef Lateef.
I haven't.
Have you ever read any of his stuff?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Why do you ask?
Well, he was one of the, like, I mean, obviously, like, his recordings are fucking just some of the deepest shit I think I've ever heard
Oh
on
sure, yeah.
the planet. Um, but there's an article, and I'm gonna try to find this by the time we actually post this episode. But there it was either a talk that had been transcribed or an essay, but he was talking about how the blues is so deep that you'll never understand it, no matter how far you get into it. And the way he explained it, and this shit blew my mind. Um, he explained it was like, all right, so what is the blues? Like, what is it? And he explains a little further. It's like, well, it's a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord at its most like root element,
Hmm.
and it varies from 1, 4, and 5, thousands and thousands of ways, but at its root, it's those 3 chords, and then he goes on to, and how do you improvise over this? And he's like, well, you use the pentatonic scale, which is your 1, your 3, your 5, your 6, your 1. Yeah, like he just like starts talking about it like this, but then he's like, well, what is a blues scale? Like what makes a blues scale different than a pentatonic scale? And it gets into like, well, there's the blue note, which is the tritone, and he's like the way he explained it was, well, it's because it's the blue note. It's that note that's not quite matching with the rest of the key, and it's because in that note holds all the oppression, and you'll never understand how deep that goes.
Ah.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and then like no fucking joke, I listened to BB King record. Like no, I looked him up on YouTube, like because I was just like, all right, who's like the most like standard blues like person I can think of, and all of a sudden it just fucking made so much sense in a different way. Uh, so it had never like clicked that way. It was like, oh my fucking god, that tritone. It's like there is so much just like pain and like history in that one note, and so the whole point of it. I'll try to find this article to post it. But it was one of those like just deep thoughts on it's like you can literally be a master and you'll still never get it, like fully, and it just I don't know. What do y'all think of that?
Oh yeah. Oh shit. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just
I mean,
think about that for the next couple of years.
So Dorian,
Well-
it's like you sort of you're just explaining this little story that's very technical, and then you just dropped this conceptual bomb. He dropped this conceptual bomb in the middle of that, just like
yeah.
wow. Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's beautiful because it's. I think it really just is a good reminder that black music in general has this kind of emphasis on the individual and not just black music, but like I think like a lot of like just American music generally has this emphasis on the individual and just like agency, and that's never not gonna be important for people who kind of pursue that, but I think it's a good reminder that there still is this kind of like there's still a continuum of the music, and you need to not necessarily place any more or less importance on yourself, but you're still part of this continuum, and at the end of the day, like when you die, it quite literally no longer is about you, but it's about like the part that the very small and big at the same time part that you play in this like lineage, basically, that's like ancestral fucking mass, and it's a mass that's characterized by parts that are all very individualized and very 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 idiosyncratic, but I don't know, that's just important, I think, to like kind of always keep in, for me at least, it's important to keep in the back of my mind that like I'm really trying to have my own voice be clarified, and I say clarified as opposed to create my own voice, because I think that having your quote unquote own voice is inherent, but what we do, I think, is more about articulating it, clarifying it, making it as transparent to other people, or as or not transparent, but allowing other people to hear it the way that we hear it ourselves, and that's always and yeah, that'll always be a thing that is driving you to do what you do. But I think that as long as you can hold on to the fact that you didn't do any of your shit alone, first of all, and and
exactly.
people are gonna use your shit to like do their shit, so it's never just about you, and I don't know, like people who who are really just trying to do their own thing without being isolated, with being isolated and just like not talking to anyone, I don't know, usually make bad music, and when they do, it's because we listen to a lot of music. So it's never just about you, and it's
Do you find that to be? Do you find that the idea of it not being just about you? Do you find that to be a freeing thought?
Yeah, I do, in a really kind of like existential sort of way, like I don't know, like
well,
yeah,
it's
like,
existential.
Yeah, totally, dude.
Sorry, say that again.
Well, it's just that, like, it gives you the free. It's sort of it sets up a set of constraints that also give you freedom about how you interact in those constraints. I'm talking about musical constraints.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, well, I can do what all these other people did, and I don't feel like there's the classical music is so weighed down by this idea of originality in like composing. And in some ways, that's just not very, very helpful to make the next piece. It's like, but if you're sort of not worried about your own ego as it surfaces in the music, which everybody talks way too much about, if it really ends up being more about how how am I going to solve this problem? And these other people have solved similar problems in these ways, and would their solution work, or can I change it to do something else? It's sort of, for me, it's a way of like imagining. It's a way to get through the process of making the next thing in a way that's not, I don't get bogged down in, oh my God, it sounds too much like blank.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the word process in there, and I think that's super key for the way that I think about this kind of stuff, because Yeah, I mean, music is like when you're listening to it, it's expressed in in the process. Like when as a piece is unfolding, it's not there isn't
Right.
like really like a product really because even the word product kind of implies that like there is a like a temporal singularity to it, the way that is
Yeah.
with like a painting
Mm-hmm.
or like visual art, and yeah, I mean it's like yeah, like it's everyone wants to be original when like this whole like virtue of originality is kind of touted as like the you know the I don't know the guiding force of all that is good and holy, but
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah.
it's like we're still all just people, and like I don't think that there's any reason why you should expect your shit to be um more different from other people's than you are different from them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Yes,
I
yes,
don't know,
it does.
and like yeah, I don't know if that's like that might be like oversimplifying it, but like I mean I don't know, like it's like yeah, like music is like can be complex, but like that's not to say that like people in and of themselves are not complex, and like if music is your only kind of um, representation or signifier of how complex you are as a person, I mean that's just not giving yourself enough credit. But then it's also this I don't know, like it shouldn't be like this avatar of who you are. Like it's a thing that you do, and
Ah, nice.
Yeah,
just like
totally.
fucking like write the shit. Like don't like I don't know, like
Sure.
write it and then like just
Right.
get
Well,
yeah. Goddamn.
Yeah,
you
I
just well,
I
to
actually
get
I
so.
have
Go
two.
ahead.
Oh,
David.
go ahead, David. Sorry.
No, no, yeah, you finished. You started your sentence before I did. You're
Yeah,
good.
so I got just two little comments here. The first one is this is a Charlie Hayden quote that I absolutely love, and I think it does fit into this. But he says, um, I learned at a very young age that music teaches you about life. When you're in the midst of improvisation, there is no yesterday and no tomorrow. There is just the moment that you are in. In that beautiful moment, you experience your true insignificance to the rest of the universe. And then, and only then, that you can experience your true significance.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You
like,
could just you could just cut
well,
out everything that I said for the past 10 minutes because that's kind of just. I mean, that's where I got. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
It's
so then the second thing, this is David and I are obviously like real interested in politics. Well, I mean, I'm actually not interested in politics at all. I just feel like we have to be involved with it because of the planet we live on. Um, but
yeah.
you were just talking about how we almost view music as a product, and it really shouldn't be viewed
Right.
that way. Um, and it's like that to me is just such a such a capitalist way to look at to look at part of the entire human experience. A couple podcasts ago, David and I were talking about how you had to do the GRE, and there was
Yeah.
some bullshit article about
Oh,
like
Philip
music
Glass.
education and how
Oh, music
how
education. Yeah.
like yeah, it was like giving students music education or music lessons will enhance their math skills,
Right.
and
Oh God.
which is like there's not it's not
That's
that that's
fine.
not a
Whatever.
true statement in itself. Like it's like yeah, like
Right.
of course, like the more you're exercising your brain and exercising your mind, of course you'll gain strength in other areas, um, but but like music has been with us since the Paleolithic era. Like we've had music since the discovery of fire, and to just like write it off as like a secondary thing that enhances our ability to be part of the workforce
Mm-hmm.
is I don't
Right.
know. I find it like really really insulting to to the human species as a whole. Like it's been a part of us since we started developing consciousness. Um,
And
Yeah.
is and
so
as if
I don't know.
math and as if math doesn't if in learning math doesn't somehow make one better at music, right? You like the other possibility is something they would never bring up in a similar circumstance, right?
Right. And even if it did, like it
Because
wouldn't matter, yeah, because
right,
it's
they're
so
like, oh yeah, who
undervalued.
cares? And they're like, but I mean, it's obvious to us. It's like, you know, being able to count and more complicated mathematical things. There are so many more complicated mathematical things that you have to embody as you play music or figure out how to notate. I mean, that the ability to actually do all the math crap they taught us all when we were kids, I mean, is inherently necessary to do some of these things.
Right.
And so it's like, what about the idea of math as a way to make us all better musicians? You know, it's like, why don't we talk about that in society? You know.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I mean, math is, you know, it's an entirely, you know, it's found in nature. Like it's still like a conceptual entity that exists, and we have a way of and we developed our own way of understanding it. But that's still very different than the fact that we like actually humans invented music. I mean, okay, like barring like the whole like animal thing or like quote unquote accidental music, but the fact that that you needed an ear to process sound and then a brain to like interpret it as music, like I don't know, just the celebration of like existence and reaffirmation of our own lives and identity, like the fact that isn't acknowledged as that is super depressing, because then it's like it's almost like we have this mindset of like, okay, like you don't choose to get born, so you're just like on this planet suddenly, and then like the way shit works is that you know have to survive, so you get a job and make money and eat food, and then like you have 2 days a week to like not do that, so you get to hang out on weekends, and then the cycle repeats until you kick it. Like that mindset to me is entirely embodied by just this whole thing of completely throwing away art. And I'm sorry for like to y'all and the listeners who are super bummed up about what I just said, but you know, it's yeah, I don't know, that shit just, I mean, but like that shit is dark, right? I mean, like,
right,
yeah,
of course it's dark. It's
a
fucking shit fest. You know, we're dealing with this. We got this whole set of societal constraints around us that are basically organized around like, well, you know, all those things you like, you put those over there. You got to make sure that rich people stay rich. That's your number one priority.
Yep.
And anything else you do, if it doesn't help rich people get rich, well, you're going to do that on your own fucking time. It's just, it's a huge waste of human energy and potential.
Oh yeah.
Nick, I did want to just because we're starting to get to the last 20 minutes. So I had met you because my wife, Heinel Pivnik, had been. Well, first off, like we had been hearing about you from various people, and you did a show at Arate, and it was one that Charlotte Mundy was on, and so we went to go listen to you, and we were both just completely floored by the musical vocabulary that you had, because you know, like we don't like to just jump on people because we hear they're cool. Like we like to go check them out ourselves, and it was like, holy fuck, this dude's fucking brilliant. But we were really drawn to your piece, La Operación, which is a double saxophone trio and soprano voice. So I was wondering if maybe we could kind of dig into some of this piece and you know, get your insight into what this piece is about, and why you've been like, I don't even want to say wrote it, because I think you're continuously writing it. Is that true to say?
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, just just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm happy to hear that you guys thought it was cool. That's always, you know, bonus points for my adolescence and my current brain. Yeah, so La Operación, I've been using the term abstract meditation on which is the closest thing that feels accurate to me. But yeah, it's a piece that I premiered at Roulette last June. It's part of my Van Leer Fellowship, and it's Um, there's so many angles to it. But okay, so one day a couple of years ago, I was sitting in a class at the new school in the liberal arts college, and the class was a class. The class was called Reproduction, Art, and Politics, and so we watched this documentary. It's a really short documentary, super, not like super like minimally produced kind of thing, by this filmmaker whose name is Ana Maria Garcia. And the entire documentary is about the United States imposed population control and sterilization policies that were put in Puerto Rico in the mid 20th century, like in the 50s and 60s. And the documentary, it's very narrative, but they interview a lot of women, Puerto Rican women, specifically Afro Puerto Rican women, who who in the past have undergone this sterilization procedure, and they they just really shed light on this super dark history because a lot of manipulation, misinformation, and in some cases straight up lying was used to kind of give these women the idea that sterilization is cool, it's hip, it's the new thing to do. And all of this, ultimately was just driven by corporations who wanted to set up shop in Puerto Rico, and who felt that the quote unquote overcrowding of Puerto Rico was getting in the way of that. And meanwhile, like they're saying, like, oh, like get out of the islands, come to New York where there's plenty of space. But like the numbers of populants in New York per like square mile was like 6 times or so more, something like that, more than it was in Puerto Rico. So it's completely like transparent, completely just about like profit driven shit, at the expense of women, let alone women in a colony, let alone black women in a colony, or primarily black. So so that's what this documentary sheds light on, and it blew my mind that I hadn't known about it. Because I'm Puerto Rican on my mom's side, and I dug deep into it. And the thing about my piece, La Operación, is it's not. I don't think of it as being about this thing. I really try to stay away from the whole thing about like writing something about something else. But it is, this thing, this information still affected me, and specifically the fact that I received this information through a documentary affected me, in a certain way that I just, I don't know. I write about the shit that's interesting to me, and it's kind of that cut and dry as far as I can see. And this is something that's super interesting to me and really important to me, and not just because of the content, but it's also a part of me sort of, I don't love the word reclaiming, but I'm going to use the word reclaiming my heritage and really establishing myself again, like in this continuum. Like I'm American, I'm African American, I'm Puerto Rican, but and I have my own identity, but I'm still part of this massive identities that led to my literal birth. So I'm not gonna. I don't know. I feel like it's important to still acknowledge that in some way, and my best way of expression is through music. So that's kind of my way of doing that. And yeah, so the piece does use elements of the documentary and these interviews in different ways, and I do want to expand the piece in further iterations that would use the documentary and other things that I've learned about this phenomena in certain ways. But yeah, I mean, it's if we want to get into like the music kind of part of it, it's right now it's, oh gosh, that version was like 50 something minutes, and the soprano who sings in this piece, Stephanie Lambrea, she's amazing, and she sort of serves as, sometimes she takes this kind of like narrator-like role, and other times she's used more like as a in a more instrumental role. Instrumental as in like an instrument, not as in like important, but also important. And yeah, it's the instrumentation of the piece is another rabbit hole that I want to dive into. The idea of two bass, two drums, two saxes. That's something that so many musicians who are heroes of mine have done. Namely, Ornette Coleman.
Yeah.
And even the way that the piece was performed, it uses timers. It's a stopwatch piece, and that is something that I directly got from working with Darius Jones, the November prior.
Wow.
Yeah, he premiered a piece at Roulette that uses stopwatches, and just the amount of freedom that, I mean, it does have its challenges, but the amount of freedom that you get from that, rhythmically and as far as shaping the entire arc, is really staggering. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to get into, but all that to say that the piece is very much a culmination, and even that word feels weird because it feels a little bit final, but it is a culmination of all these things that I'm interested in at the same time, and that's always been something that I've been kind of self-conscious about, is this feeling of being very feeling like I'm spread too thin. But I figure, if I have an opportunity to write something that is just so like big, like in the literal sense of the word, then that could be a moment where I can at least have some of these seemingly disparate interests of mine converge into a singular, cohesive piece.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's that specific or...
Yeah, no,
I think we want to listen to it.
I mean, just first off, I haven't gotten the chance to watch the documentary. I actually probably will in the next month or so. Just
it's like 40 minutes, not too long.
Happen. Yeah, but it just it really 17%. Really it really is just fucking disgusting. What has happened and continues to happen to just so many people on this planet through various government and corporate and white supremacist oriented power structures. It's obviously, I'm gonna say it's obviously a given, but still, it just even you recapping it there, just I just feel ill, honestly, just hearing about it. But the second part is just the musical construct, like the stopwatch piece that you were speaking about. And I didn't realize you had been influenced by Darius Jones, who was just, first off, just an absolute incredible musician and artist and thinker. But yeah, just I love the approach to really using music as almost it's in its purest form, which is movement through time. And really just focusing on it in that sort of realm. I'm not sure what I'm saying exactly, but just this is really heavy stuff, man. Yeah.
No, I like the idea of I'm also a person that does way too many things and feels spread thin, and I agree. It's always nice to be able to find a way to sort of bring all of it together at some points, because in some sense they're related. Because they're related because you care about them, right?
Right.
And it's that I mean, we live in a time when the possibilities of art are expanding so rapidly with all of our technology that the ability to make everything, the idea that you would mix or juxtapose or whatever kind of word you want to use to bring things together is so much more expected, or just nobody really bats an eye at that idea anymore. So might as well do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
No, I know. I just think in the end, I think it makes people more interesting, and it's obviously it's very easy to make art that's bad that does those things. But if you take care and make sure that it's something that you actually want to have created, it's. I think in some ways it often makes for just a much more interesting or memorable experience sitting and listening to. Right? It's just like, well, I never thought that anyone would ever do anything like this. I mean, I'm a music critic, and so the things that I end up remembering are when people do stuff like you're describing, where it's like, wow, I never thought to do all of that at the same time.
Right. Well, I mean, honestly, I just see it as being indulgent. Like, because I didn't think, I only really noticed that all these things kind of came together after the fact. But in the moment, it's kind of just about, like, chasing interests and, like, and certainly not all of my interests were, I guess, quote-unquote, represented in La Operación, but I just tried to be indulgent as possible. It's like, I have this opportunity to perform my work, and I just, like, I like this thing, Do they go together? Yes or no? And then it's just, like, like, just not feeling bashful about taking up the space, because the space is mine in the first place. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time thinking about, I wonder what the artist was thinking about when they did this. And the answer is likely they weren't.
Yeah.
It's like they were worrying about other things, and that's what happened when they were doing that.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that it isn't amazing. It's just, it's a different kind than most people usually talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Well, it sounds really cool. I love that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, but Dorian and I have both been moving in this sort of similar politically related music in the past few years. Mm-hmm. Especially Dorian, right?
Yeah, I think every one of my pieces since 2013 has had a political undertone to it. Not even undertone. Blatant political
content. Right. I mean, you're doing a different form of Zhevsky, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's like you said. It's like you don't like. I'm not like interested in like so-called political shit, but like, if you're paying attention, then there's no way that it can't. And you have like some basic kind of empathy. There's no way that it can't bother you, and that'll find its way into what you do somehow, I think.
Right. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, there was a commentary I heard once. There's this podcast I listened to called Street Fight Radio. It's an anarchist comedy podcast. It's like really funny but politically driven as well. And they were talking about, like the sort of stereotypical white father-in-law from the Midwest who's like, I hate politics. I don't care. Why does everyone have to make everything political? And then they get mad at everything on TV, and it's like, that in itself is a political act. Or not caring about politics is a political act. That proves your place of privilege. The fact that you don't have to consider this thing.
Right.
And it's just, it's. I would love to not have to focus on just socio-political concerns, but they have to be addressed. They have to be brought in the forefront. I love the Noam Chomsky take on why he criticizes the United States, and his explanation is like, well, I'm an American and I have more of an impact here than I do anywhere else in the world. So I'm going to.
I was going to bring up Chomsky for a different reason. One of the things he talks about is that he mentions that, like, people ask him, it's like, why have you spent all this time on politics? Wouldn't you like to spend more time on linguistics? And he says, well, of course. There's so much more work I could have done with linguistics over the years. But there was a moral imperative to talk about American imperialism and other problems in the world. I didn't have a choice. I had to do this other stuff too. And so that was at the expense of my work in some ways. But he doesn't regret it. This is the way my life had to go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just
Yeah,
it's just an
exactly.
imperative. And when it's not an imperative, like for you, like when you're doing so-called political or dare I say activist work for a reason that
Sure.
isn't just because you have to do it in the first, like you have this innate need to do it. I think that's super
Mm-hmm.
transparent, and people can see right through it.
Yep.
And I
Mm-hmm.
realized I just
Oh yeah.
defined what
I've
We
been to
transparent
plenty
means
of
after I
concerts
said
like
it,
that.
but yeah.
Right. It's just
No, we
it's
call it hashtag resist at 10th intervention when we see people that
Oh God.
that they jump on the activist dollar, like it's like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter, and there's one African American person totally tokenized in a group of white people
Oh,
like that.
totally.
Like,
right.
yeah, and it's just it's like I yeah. So
Oh,
yeah,
it's
we
the
call it
feminist
hashtag
concerts
resist.
that are. It's the feminist concerts that are just. We threw a bunch of women's music on a concert and didn't consider how any of it has to do with anything.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, it's just
totally.
right. It's this whole. It's like, but luckily, I've also been able to attend concerts where they really do and hear music where they really do think about what would this mean. Taking as with a feminist context, what would this music mean? And they've been some of the most important concerts I've ever been to. Just by actually thinking it through and it being really important that you do so, it can be a really amazing experience. It just requires that the people actually care.
Yeah, totally. And like ideally, it gets to the point where we don't even have to think about it at all, and where caring is just kind of like not even this thing that is a part of it, but just like at a certain point, yeah, like, and I don't know if this will get in our become the case in our lifetimes, but just doing any kind of thoughtful work we can, just so that it gets to the point where it just is. It's not this extra kind of thing,
Right.
Yeah,
extra
Yeah. I
effort.
mean,
Yeah.
that's yes. The goal
Hmm.
is
yeah,
the world where it's just this is how it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, wouldn't that be nice?
yeah. So
But,
I'm gonna
like the
I'm
one.
gonna ask. Oh, sorry, David. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, you're fine. I wasn't really going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I am gonna ask the dumb music question.
Oh goodness.
But what is it like playing with multiple bass players? Because I know you have a piece called "The Floor Is Lava" for
Hmm.
five double basses.
Yeah.
What's that experience like playing with a whole bunch of low end instruments with similar timbre?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's not that weird to be honest. It's like I write the music in such a way that we're not uh, a lot of the time we're not doing the the same kinds of sounds. Like I try to really just like flesh out
Yeah, yeah.
the entire um, spectrum of what the bass can do. Um,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and then like when there are moments where we're like kind of literally all doing the same thing, um, it goes through this emotional curve for me where at first it's like, oh wow, this is weird, and then it's like, oh wow, this is fucking hilarious, and then it's like you get in, and then I'm like, oh wow, I'm in this kind of like trance sort of space, and then it goes on for longer, and then it's back to,
Yeah.
oh, this is hilarious, and then it's like this kind of repeated cycle. Um, and yeah,
Sure, sure.
I mean that's part of it. Like, there's no way to have five basses like walking onto a stage like not be silly in some way. Um, but
Well, I know.
I mean,
Dude, I've
I'm
never
watching
even
the
like thought of it.
video.
Yeah.
I'm watching the video with the sound off, and I'm just watching you bow the tailpiece, and I'm just remembering that one of my favorite things is the sound of a bowed tailpiece.
oh
So
yeah.
it's just like, yeah, it's just like this is. I love this.
No, yeah, yeah.
Oh
I mean, yeah.
man,
That's the
dude,
thing. There are
totally.
so many bass players that I love, and we all have such different sounds, and so that's part of me wanting
Hmm.
to one of my goals in the piece. And yeah, I mean, it's just I don't know. It's a beautiful instrument. I mean, kind of have to think so, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. um, and I love so many bass
Oh,
players who I know, like in
yeah.
New York, I guess. So um, yeah, it doesn't really phase me as far as the fact that we're all playing the same instrument goes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Dorian has a certain weird experience with it because he's not used to playing with piano players very much.
Oh, sure.
So he thinks that like instruments it's kind of weird to do them together, but it's something that we like oboe players do. It's like, this is normal kind of stuff. It's like, we're used to being in a groups of a few. We might not be playing only us, but we're used to being in groups.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. What I was just gonna say was we do a version of Robert Ashley's Perfect Lives. David and I do, and one of the movements, one of the acts is Act 4, the bar. And we brought up Brad Whiteley, who's badass piano player, and he and I basically play piano duets if there's two pianos. And the very first time we ever played together in a rehearsal, we were both so tripped out hearing piano that wasn't our own fingers. It was a really trippy experience to be like, where's this chord coming from? I'm not playing it.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of it, it's like we're both virtuosos. So it was like, it was really fucking fun to just be playing like these nuanced things on the instrument, like that only pianists or at least only keyboard instruments do. And we're just fucking like going back and forth, making all these dumb piano jokes that we're like cracking the fuck up about.
Yeah.
And no one else is like laughing the same way we're laughing because it's like, yeah, of course you're doing that thing. Like I've never heard any other instrument play this because I'm the one that always plays that. And I should say, like, it's not like we were completely overwhelmed and shocked. Like, it immediately clicked, But it was, like, after the fact we were talking about it. And was like, dude, that fucking tripped me out. Like, hearing chords that I wasn't fucking playing. But then, like, you did this, and of course, like, some of these things don't even have terms. Like we're like, you did that one chromatic thing that Bud Powell always does. Or, it was just, it was such a fucking fun experience playing with another piano player. And yeah,
you mean Dorian, when I improvise on top of you playing piano, when I come over and start playing with you, it's not the same experience?
Well, no, I mean, like there are realms of it, but there's particular things Brad does that you don't do, David.
Well, yeah, I think let's start listing them, and we'll run out of time. No.
Yeah. Well, hey, dudes, I just realized we're past the hour mark, but Nick, did you want to tell us about anything else, like maybe any upcoming projects you have? This is going to be premiering, I think, in mid-December. So
okay, yeah.
But, any projects you might have coming up and any contact, like how can people find you?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have a couple things coming up. I am doing a solo show at Downtown Music Gallery on January 26th.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude.
I'm doing, my band, Atlantic Extraction, is playing at Threes Brewing on February 26th.
Oh, cool.
And by the way, that band, we put out our record a few weeks ago on November 1st. It's on outofyourheadrecords.com. And, that's the website, not the label's name. But yeah, Out of Your Heads Records.
Yeah.
And so thanks to everyone who's listened to that so far. And then I have a new thing coming up in April. It's April 7th at Seeds in Prospect Heights in Brooklyn. And that's a new project I'm working on. This iteration of it is a quartet with myself on bass, Sarah Rossi on voice, Lex Corden on piano, and Weston Alenki on electronics. That's right, I'm getting into electronics, folks. So that's kind of my.
Tiger starts playing.
Yeah, exactly. But that's my new I guess like my currently budding interest. Just dealing with electronics. As like in acoustic instrumental context. yeah, so those are the three things on the horizon as a leader that I have coming up.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then like where can people find you online?
Oh yeah, sorry. So it's nickdunston.org. .org was cheaper than .com for some reason. So yeah, nickdunston.org is my website. Yeah.
It'll be in
I like
the show
the idea
notes,
of you
everybody.
being an entire organization.
Well,
Right?
do what you can to market
Well,
yourself.
com is company, so
Oh yeah, well, I'll take organization then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that website is I keep it pretty up to date, and so it has like all my performances, contact information, discography, bio, all the stuff.
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, Dorian, you want to wrap it up?
Man, yeah, it was such a pleasure having you on here. You know, we're still like such babies in this podcast thing. Like this is episode 8. You know, so we're still kind of figuring out our own flow on everything. But I just, you know, I knew you were one person that we really wanted to talk to because I like just, you know, you've got a real fresh take on you know, sonic exploration, and you're a very, very genuine, honest person, and it just, you know, I was floored when I saw you play the first
thank
time.
you.
It was just like, all right, this dude's on some shit. And then, we didn't even talk about the fact that you and I have a mutual connection with Lucas Kadish and Bobby Salvaggio.
Woo!
That
Yeah.
didn't even come.
That's for next time.
Yeah.
Akron, Ohio.
But yeah, man, it was super cool talking to you. I loved hearing your insights. You know, and we're gonna have you back on, I think, unless you don't want to. But
No,
we'd love to have you back on. Let me put it that way.
We'll invite you back on again, and what you do is your choice. Exactly.
No,
Yeah,
thanks for having me. I'm super
David,
down to. Oh, sorry. Go on.
What were we
Oh
gonna
yeah,
say, Dorian?
no. I was
just saying
ask,
thanks.
David,
Yeah.
do you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh no, this has been a great conversation. I really liked talking with you this evening. That's great.
Cool.
So,
thanks.
It should be
super
a
fun.
good episode.
Hope so.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
All
Thanks,
right, well,
guys. Thanks for having
My
me.
name is Dorian Wallace. Oh shit! I fucking stumbled
Go
over
ahead and do
that.
the
One.
outro,
This is
Dorian.
where, yeah. All right, outro begin. My name's Dorian Wallace, composer, piano player, and this is David Kulma, my friend and colleague, composer and oboist and a lot of other shit. We had Nick Dunston on, super badass composer and bass player. This is Trysteropod. We'll see you next time. Later.
Have a good one.
Thank you.